The Royal Pavilion is a former royal residence located in Brighton, England, United Kingdom. It was built in 3 stages, beginning in 1787, as a seaside retreat for George, Prince of Wales, who became the Prince Regent in 1811. It is often referred to as the Brighton Pavilion. It is built in the Indo-Saracenic style prevalent in India for most of the 19th century. History: the Prince of Wales, who later became George IV, first visited Brighton in 1783, at the age of 21. The seaside town had become fashionable through the residence of George's uncle, Prince Henry, Duke of Cumberland, whose tastes for cuisine, gaming, the theatre and fast living the young prince shared, and with whom he lodged in Brighton at Grove House. In addition, his physician advised him that the seawater would be beneficial for his gout. In 1786, under a financial cloud that had been examined in Parliament for the extravagances incurred in building Carlton House, London, he rented a modest erstwhile farmhouse facing the Styne, a grassy area of Brighton used as a promenade by visitors. Being remote from the royal court in London, the pavilion was also a discreet location for the prince to enjoy liaisons with his longtime companion, Maria Fitzherbert. The prince had wished to marry her, and did so in secrecy, as her Roman Catholic religion ruled out marriage under the Royal Marriages Act 1772. In 1787 the designer of Carlton House, Henry Holland, was employed to enlarge the existing building, which became one wing of the Marine Pavilion, flanking a central rotunda, which contained only 3 main rooms, a breakfast room, dining room and library, fitted out in Holland's French-influenced neoclassical style, with decorative paintings by Biagio Rebecca. In 1801–02 the pavilion was enlarged with a new dining room and conservatory, to designs of Peter Frederick Robinson, in Holland's office. The prince also purchased land surrounding the property, on which a grand riding school and stables were built in an Indian style in 1803–08, to designs by William Porden. These dwarfed the Marine Pavilion, in providing stabling for 60 horses. Between 1815 and 1822 the designer John Nash redesigned and greatly extended the pavilion, and it is the work of Nash which can be seen today. The palace looks rather striking in the middle of Brighton, having a very Indian appearance on the outside. However, the fanciful interior design, primarily by Frederick Crace and the little-known decorative painter Robert Jones, is heavily influenced by both Chinese and Indian fashion. It is a prime example of the exoticism that was an alternative to more classicizing mainstream taste in the Regency style. Purchased by Brighton. After the death of George IV in 1830, his successor King William IV also stayed in the pavilion on his frequent visits to Brighton. Queen Victoria, however, disliked Brighton and the lack of privacy the pavilion afforded her on her visits there, especially once Brighton became accessible to Londoners by rail in 1841, and the cramped quarters it provided her growing family. She purchased the land for Osborne House in the Isle of Wight, which became the summer home of the royal family. After her last visit to Brighton in 1845, the government planned to sell the building and grounds. The Brighton Commissioners and the Brighton Vestry successfully petitioned the government to sell the pavilion to the town for £53,000 in 1850 under the Brighton Improvement Act 1850. In 1860, the adjacent royal stables were converted to a concert hall now known as the Brighton Dome. The town used the building as assembly rooms. Many of the pavilion's original fixtures and fittings were removed on the order of the royal household at the time of the sale, most ending up either in Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. Queen Victoria returned to Brighton large quantities of unused fittings in the late 1860s. George V and Queen Mary returned more after the First World War. Since the Second World War, the municipality of Brighton has spent a great deal of time, effort and money restoring the pavilion to its state at the time of King George IV, encouraged by the permanent loan of over 100 items of furniture from Queen Elizabeth II in the 1950s, and has undertaken an extensive program of restoring the rooms, reinstating stud walls, and creating replicas of some original fittings and occasionally pieces of furniture. First World War. During the First World War, the pavilion, along with other sites in Brighton, was transformed into a military hospital. From November 1914 to early 1916, recovering soldiers from the Imperial Indian Army were stationed there. The adjacent dome was equipped with an operating room and more beds. The pavilion was partly used in imperial efforts to convince potential Indian recruits that their wounded countrymen were being well treated. A series of photographs was produced, with the official sanction of the state, showing the resplendent rooms converted into hospital wards. The soldiers also received visits from Lord Kitchener in July 1915, and King George V in August of the same year, who presented several soldiers with military honours. In 1916, the Indian soldiers were moved on from Brighton after their redeployment in the Middle East. By that stage, roughly 14,000 wounded Indian servicemen had passed through the town's hospitals. The pavilion continued to be used as a hospital for wounded British soldiers until the end of the war in 1918. Tourism. The purchase of the Royal Pavilion from Queen Victoria, by Brighton, marked the beginnings of the city. Unregistered trademark S. Tourism dominance through the Royal Pavilion. Unregistered trademark S. Transition from a private residence to a public attraction under civic ownership. Today, around 400,000 people visit the Royal Pavilion annually. Gay marriage. On March 29, 2014, the Royal Pavilion was host to one of a number of the very first legal gay marriages to take place in the United Kingdom following the passing of the 2013 Same-Sex Couples Act. References and notes. Further reading: Dinkle, John, 1983. The Royal Pavilion, Brighton, Morley, John, 1983. The Making of the Royal Pavilion, Musgrave, Clifford, 1951. Royal Pavilion, A Study in the Romantic, Musgrave, Clifford, 1959. Royal Pavilion, An Episode in the Romantic, Roberts, Henry D., 1939. The History of the Royal Pavilion, Brighton, Rutherford, Jessica M. F., 2003. A Prince's Passion, The Life of the Royal Pavilion. External links: The Royal Pavilion and Museum's official website, images of the Royal Pavilion, the Royal Pavilion and Museums Foundation. Dr. Brighton's Pavilion. The Royal Pavilion is a hospital for soldiers of the British Indian Army during World War I. Map of Brighton. Brighton map-based information. Retrieved May 11, 2008.